DeadCentre, Day 1. It's amazing how something as innocuous as checking the price of a Stanley hammer for a customer can end up saving your life. I fetched it from the shelf and took it to the help desk, running into Grace on my way there. She had a way of cheering me up. She was like the last blooming flower on a frozen field. Or some shit like that, I don't know. I'm not a poet. It was a cold week in December, so Grace was snugly wrapped in her company-issued jacket. A rose tint to her cheeks. She'd just fought off a killer cold like I had. It had seemed everybody had caught it. I scanned the hammer through the system. It came up as £9 and headed back to the customer. I caught Grace's eye on the way past, and she smiled. She was helping a little girl with something, kneeling down on one knee to speak to her, eye to eye. The girl was sniffling through the flu in tears. Then the little girl collapsed. She was in Grace's arms before she could hit the deck, and I began rushing towards them to help. I pulled my phone from my pocket, the one I wasn't supposed to have on the shop floor, and dialed the emergency number. The dial tone was almost enough to mask the concerned shouts from people around us. Almost. A cool and robotic Englishwoman spoke down the line of the NHS emergency number. All our operators are busy at the moment. Please hold until we can take your call. The recorded message played a few more times, and then things really went south. More people started to drop. The girl stopped breathing. I looked into Grace's eyes and saw tears and bewilderment, raw pain and confusion. Silence reigned as more and more people dropped to the floor in the less than crowded store. It was later on in the day, so there were about 30 people in the shop, including staff. Please state the nature of your emergency, a hoarse female voice sounded on the phone, moments later. She sounded rushed, scared even. At that moment, the little girl opened her eyes. Oh, thank God. She's opened her eyes, she's collapsed, but now she's okay, I told the operator in a panicked mess. Kill it, the voice replied. What? I stared in confusion as the little girl lurched forward and sank its teeth into Grace's neck. Crimson blood ran into her long ginger hair, and her face went from scared, relieved to horrified in seconds. I don't rightly know how or why I reacted so fast, but I grabbed the girl by the neck and yanked her off of Grace, tearing a chunk of flesh away with her teeth. She didn't spit it out, she began to eat it. I pinned her to the floor as she was reaching out at my face with her arms and gnashing her teeth, trying to bite me. The Stanley hammer was still in my hand. I brought it down on her face again and again and again until she stopped moving. Most of me recoiled in revulsion. Most. A small, terribly deep and dark part of me enjoyed it. The feeling of the hammer as it cracked down like thunder. The feeling of strength, of power. My breath came raggedly when I finished, and other people who collapsed began to rise, falling on family members and strangers alike. I grabbed Grace, pressed a handful of her own jacket to her wound, and hauled her to her feet, intending to go to the back of the shop. The staff-only area had a magnetically locked fire door. However, there was a small war happening between us and that relatively safe haven. It was a straight shot from where I was to the safety of the back room. It also happened to be right past the checkouts, the busiest place of the shop. I got my left arm around Grace's slender waist and began to move. A figure lurched from the confectionery aisle, teeth first. If I had thought about it, I would have died. Lucky for me, I didn't think. My hammer smashed through its front teeth and hooked its cheek like a fish on a line. It was a man with short brown hair going grey at the temples. That was as much as I saw before I pivoted with all of my weight behind it and smashed its head into an end unit. Luckily, my hammer came free on impact as 3 separate shells of boxed fruits and nuts came down on my attacker. It didn't seem to be getting up. I picked up the pace with my half-sprint, half-hobble, dodging around other scuffles as I went, not daring to throw my hammer into the mix of any of them. It was hard to tell who was human and who was one of them. I got halfway there before a woman with golden curls rushed me from down the toiletry section. It had an ambling gait that gave me enough time to ready my hammer. My blow caught it in the temple and it went down like a sack of bricks. Its momentum still carried it forward right into my waist, sending me backwards, and painfully into a half aisle full of reduced Christmas gifts and sweets. Somehow I managed to stay upright. I kicked it away from me and got to the number pad for the back room. In my panic, I fucked up the 5-digit combination once, but got it on the second time. I swung Grace around and propped her against the wall inside. She slid to the floor, skin nearly as pale as the linoleum. "Keep pressure on that," I said as I pointed to her neck. That's what they said in the movies, right? I looked out into the madness from my place of safety. Chaos. The logical, rational lizard part of my brain screamed at me to close the door and engage the magnetic locks. I did the stupid thing and tried to save as many as I could. First I got hold of Jackie, one of my co-workers. She didn't need saving, she was busy beating one of those things down with her own 2 hands. I managed to pull her away and thankfully she didn't deck me too. I pointed her to the door and she held it for me. After that, an old lady blocked my path. She went to bite me and her dentures fell to the floor. That didn't even slow her down. I kicked the cane out from under her and slammed the hammer into the top of her head. Lights out for that one. I found a woman with a buggy hiding behind an aisle and got her back to the room safely. All the time she was babbling about her husband. A teenager in an oversized hoodie saw what I was doing and bolted for the door. Then I saw my supervisor, a lovely lady by the name of Hazel, trapped by one of those things at the checkouts. She was also a trained first aider. I ran as fast as I could and came at the thing from behind. My first blow went wide because of my sprint and smashed into the checkout screen, cracking it and sending out a plume of smoke and spark. Whoops. The thing, a middle-aged man in a tweed sweater, turned to face me. Its face had a pair of scissors sticking out of its cheek. That worried me a lot. I took an involuntary step back and tripped over some of the shit that always got left behind the checkouts, and before I knew it I was on my arse. I kicked out and caught it in the leg. It came crashing down on me in a mess of chomping teeth. Luck must have been on my side as I put my hands out to stop it. My left hand fell against the scissors and pushed them deeper inside its skull. It stopped struggling and I rolled it off me, grabbed Hazel and ran for the door. Jackie let me through, cast a quick glance at the shop floor and closed it. She held the door shut until the magnetic locks clicked into place. "What the fuck was that?" Jackie asked. Eloquent. "I'm gonna go with zombies," I replied whilst making a mental shopping list of what we need to survive the next 72 hours. "What?" A person whose face I didn't remember and voice I didn't recognize piped up. Must have been someone else with the good sense to run for the door. "Zombies. Not the brain-eating kind either, no, the new age Usain Bolt cannibal type," I said as I began directing Hazel to Grace's wound, which didn't look too bad. I expected if it had hit her jugular, she would have been dead before I could get her to safety, or at least my extensive experience as a television and film watcher told me that. The baby started crying then, and everything in my lizard brain told me to make it stop by whatever means necessary, but I suppressed it. I wasn't going to be killing any children. Well, any more children. I already knew I would have nightmares about what I'd done, nightmares of that little girl's face turning into smashed strawberry tart. It would fuck me up for a while. Didn't take a £50,000 psychology degree to work that one out. At the moment, though, the adrenaline kept me from falling to pieces, and that meant getting to work on the problem in front of me. As soon as Hazel started treating Grace, I dialed the number for the emergency services. It rang, and rang, and rang, and kept ringing. I handed my mobile to Jackie and told her to find me if it went through. Then things got a lot worse. My manager came out of her office. And she wasn't one of them, so I couldn't hit her with my hammer. Not yet, anyway. She also happened to be my sister. Oh, and the most pompous prat in history. "Why are there customers here?" was the first question out of her mouth before she froze. Like I said, prat. "Taking shelter from the hordes of murderous cannibals out there. Is that okay, or should I toss them out?" I asked her, sarcastically, as if to emphasize my point. One of them started beating the door and smushing its face into the glass and working its jaw slowly. My sister, Angela, walked over to the door and squared up to it. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to stop that or I'll be forced to call the police," she said in her loud, "I am the manager" voice. "Why don't you show him your fucking badge?" I said to myself loudly. A line from an old joke my grandmother would tell me every weekend about a farmer, a bull, and a police officer. That's how it was between us, me and my dear sister. She would do something pompous, I would reply with sarcasm and undermine her authority. She would let it slide because our mother would never speak to her if she fired me. It was a good arrangement. Our mother died a few weeks ago. Angela handed me my written dismissal, demanding I work my notice over the Christmas holidays at the wake after the funeral. Today was my last day. Fucking zombie apocalypse. Right. It was thinking time. Should I stay or should I go? And no, not the Clash song. I mentally ran down a quick pros and cons list of both options. Option A, staying here. Pros, familiar, relatively safe for the moment, plenty of food, multiple exits, plenty of weapons. Cons, in one of the densest populated areas of the northeast. No way of securing the outer perimeter of the stores, it's all tempered glass. The warehouse, where the food is, isn't connected to the staff area. You would need to go either through the shop or go outside. Option B, leaving to find another safe place or possible government assistance. Pros, there is a wholesaler not far from the shopping centre, which would have tons more food and generators. Finding help would make surviving a lot easier. Cons, the amount of dead between here and anywhere I'd want to be would be hundreds, at least. There might not be anyone else left. Slim, but possible. Decisions. Plan. Stay in the shop for a week, maybe longer, in case the government manages to contain the outbreak and help is sent. If not, move to the wholesaler, which is located on the riverfront. I've always wanted a boat. I turned to Jackie, who still had my mobile, and whispered in her ear, "Don't let her open that fucking door." She smiled at me, fully understanding what I'd said. Jackie didn't like Angela much to begin with, so stopping her from doing what she wanted and getting us killed in the process wasn't a hard sell. With that sorted out, I began scouring the place for any container that can hold water. Boxes, bins, bottles, you name it. One customer we dragged in approached me, an older man with lines on his face and grey in his hair. "What should I do?" he asked. I don't know if he meant in general or right now, but I needed an extra pair of hands. "What's your name?" I asked him. No need to start off introductions wrongly, apocalypse aside. "Frank," he said. His face had that 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd just seen something horrendous. "Hello, Frank. My name is Sam." I told him like you would a particularly frail child. "Help me fill these containers with water." He nodded at that, and we walked to the staff break room. I stopped dead. There was someone in the break room. They were laughing. I gave the containers to Frank, readied my hammer, and peered through the glass, looking square. Then nearly died laughing. It was Ed, a colleague watching something on his phone with those big dumb fucking headphones on. I stepped into the room and he looked at me, head to toe. "Ed, apocalypse time," I told him as he took off his headphones. "Finally," he said, as he stood up. Ed was an apocalypse enthusiast. End of the world this and end of the world that. He was also fucking tall. Like, heard enough "do you play basketball" jokes to justify murder tall. He went straight to his locker and pulled out a bag, a large grey duffel. I left him to it and began filling containers from the tap. I left Frank to fill as I went back to check on the rest of the group. As predicted, Angela was trying to open the door and failing. Jackie was trying not to hurt her and succeeding. We were going to have to venture out sooner or later, and if Angela got eaten in the process, well, 2 birds, 1 stone. I ushered the customers into the staff room with Frank, a brown-haired woman with her baby, the teenager in the oversized hoodie, and a few I hadn't dragged in personally. That included a Captain Ahab-looking motherfucker, a woman in her early 20s, and an older lady who might break her hip in a stiff breeze. Wonderful. I helped Hazel carry Grace through as well. She'd bandaged her up as best she could. Need anything from out there? I asked her. Get some medication from the healthcare aisle. If that gets infected, we'll need antibiotics, and the only pharmacy is at the other end of the shopping centre. She told me as she gestured to Grace's wounds. I nodded and told her to barricade the doors we left. That left me, Jackie, and Ed to grab supplies. Angela was still being a fucking idiot and shouting through the glass. I went into the admin office and grabbed a cable of some sort, and didn't care what it did. It was thick and long, and that was what mattered. Snaking it around the handles of the double doors, I told Jackie and Ed the plan. Disengage the magnetic lock, hold one door until it locks again, and leave the other open but tied back to the locked one. Kill anything that tries to force its way in. 1, 2, 3. As soon as the locks clicked off, the doors began to open. The three of us pushed against one as hard as we could and held. Arms and hands came grasping through the small opening between the doors, clawing at whatever they could reach. An eternity stretched in seconds it took for the locks to reactivate. The cable was holding the other door closed for now, but it wouldn't last. A face came through the opening, teeth gnashing, of a bald man. I swung and it went limp, sliding down between the doors to be trampled. Ed had a steak knife from the kitchen in his hands, ready to get any I missed, and Jackie was holding the door back for good measure. Another head, another swing. Judging by how many heads bobbed in the windows, there were 3 or 4 more left. The cable slackened, the door opened a fraction more, but enough. A head came through along with arms and a torso. My hammer claimed another kill, but its body fell directly on the cable, knocking it loose. Ed shouldered the door, adding his weight behind it. I registered what happened, but distantly. I just looked for another face with gnashing teeth. 3 faces later and the door was clear. I was breathing heavily, but needed to do one more thing before I could rest. I began pushing the corpses outside with my foot, then let the locks take over. We were all breathing like air was on a half-price sale. Another peer through the window determined there were no undead lingering in the immediate area. Jackie, Ed, head into the warehouse and haul all the food in. Bring a cage down to me in the medicine aisle. They nodded and marched into the warehouse. I began moving the bodies clogging the door in immediate area. I grabbed wrists and ankles and hauled, piling them in aisles that we wouldn't need. I patted down pockets and bags and gathered all the mobile phones I could. It was slow work, and I tried to ignore the red trails the bodies left behind. Ed and Jackie reappeared with 4 cages between them. One of them was empty. Ed hauled the 3 full ones through the doors and Jackie ran the empty one to me. Together we began filling from the medical aisles and confectionery aisles on the other side. I snagged some baby formula, nappies and baby wipes just in case. There was only one thing I was going to risk venturing into the DIY section for. A lock and a chain. I crept up the aisle and peered out left. One of the main entrances. It wasn't exactly a hoard, but fuck me if I didn't shit myself a little bit. I kept low and swiftly retrieved the lock and chain. Running the cage back into the staff room, it slid on some blood and clanged into an aisle. Luckily it was only shampoo, but it was loud. Figures appeared between the aisles and a great shuffling of feet deafened everything else. Go, I said to Jackie, and we hauled ass back to safety. The 3 of us held the doors until they locked shut, and I snaked the chain around it in a figure of 8, tucking the key into my pocket for safekeeping. Angela stood stunned. You just murdered our customers, she blurted out in shock. Oh, fuck off, I said offhandedly. I walked to the staff room and waved through the gap. There was a scuffling sound, and then the door swung open and the rest of the group came out. Me and Jackie started unloading the cages before I realised that was a mistake. Instead, we opened the cage doors and manoeuvred them so they barricaded the double doors in case the locks failed. Then we started out handing out some food. What are you doing with our stock? Angela asked, aghast. Why could you have not been eaten? I don't know if you're just blanking all of this out on purpose to cope, or you're just really an idiot. Either way, those customers starving to death in your break room isn't going to end well, I told her and pointed at her with my hammer. Whether she took the point or not, she disappeared into her office and I went to check on Grace. Hazel exited the staff room as I approached, heading to the ladies' room to wash the blood off her hands. I joined her. "How's Grace?" I asked. "About as expected," she said, weariness in the edges of her voice. "Showing any signs of deterioration?" I whispered. The bathroom wasn't soundproof. Not that I can see, thank God. I patted her on the back and left her to wash the blood from her hands. I'd given mine a good scrub as well. Inside the staff room, Grace was sitting in one of the strangely comfortable plastic chairs. Well, anything's comfortable after standing for 2 to 4 hours. "How are you holding up?" I asked her, as I began doing the only thing I knew would help. I started making a cup of tea. The milk wouldn't keep for long anyway. "She bit me," Grace said with disbelief, lightly touching the bandage on her neck. It wasn't a little girl anymore, I told her as I sat a cup in front of her and took the seat next to her. What if there is a cure? What if it wore off?" Grace asked, not as deluded as Angela. "Then I'm going to feel really shitty, but sometimes what may be is not as important as what is. And what is a fact is that those things out there will kill and eat every single one of us," I told her, and silence lapsed in the conversation. I took the opportunity to pull out the mobiles I'd collected and began sorting them into locked and unlocked. "What are you doing?" Grace asked. Plain and simple. Letting their loved ones know. And that was all that needed to be said. She began picking up phones from the unlocked pile, and we sat for a while, texting people we didn't know for people we will never know. After that was finished, I sorted out a place for Grace to sleep and catalogued what we had, food and equipment-wise. Day 1 supplies: 93 packet of crisps, 166 chocolate bars, 14 sandwiches, 36 pot noodles, yum, 42 bags of fruits and nuts, and 214 bottled liquids, pop, water and juice. End of day 1. Thank you for listening.